Well, glad you guys are here this morning. We are closing out the series on the Quit series. Essentially, we're quitting the Quit series with this one, but don't quit on me yet because we've got one more to go, and that's me. I just want to review quickly some of the areas that we have covered in this Quit series. As Justin has led us through this, we don't want to be quitters. We don't actually advocate that. Never tell your kid, hey, be a quitter. Not a good thing. It's not what we want to raise up. But there are certain things that we've examined over the past 7 weeks. There are some things that are just not worth our energy that truly can be quit. Some of those were quit being controlled by what others think about me. Quit dying to the wrong things. Quit lying, especially to ourselves. Quit blaming. Quit denying our emotions, that we have them. They're great indicators. Quit rescuing or over-functioning. And quit our faulty thinking, which is like that ruminating on this which is just not true. Justin developed this last thing that he put forward to say that here's what we need to quit. Quit living someone else's life. Don't live someone else's life. Steve Martin has this routine. He's a comedian. Started years ago. As he was growing up, developed this, got popular in the 60s on through the 70s. He had a stand-up comedy. Then some of us might know him as the wild and crazy guy as he moved into TV and Saturday Night Live. Some of them might just know him as the jerk as he moved into movies. Even this younger generation knows him for his voiceover characterizations, his acting as a voice actor, and then even as he moved back into television in Only Murders in the Building. You know, that he's got though this part of his routine back when he was doing his stand-up comedy. And he said this, it was like, he wanted everyone to do this. He was like, let's do the nonconformist's oath. And he said to them, repeat after me, I promise to be different. And then the people would respond, I promise to be different. I promise to be unique. And they would respond, promise to be unique. I promise to not repeat things that people say. And then they would respond, I promise to. If you were to think about it for a moment, there is no one like you. There has never been anyone in history like you, nor will there ever be in the future. If you think about all the things that went into your life, I had actually a seminary professor ask our class this one time. He said, have you ever considered why you were born where you were born? And when you were born? Why weren't you born on the other side of the world? Why were you not born at a different time? What things does that put in place and in front of you that God has given to you, not just by happenstance, but on purpose? And when you think about it, there is no one else who has had the upbringing that you have had, that has the personality that you have, that thinks and processes the way that you do, whether that's you first process things in the mind or in the heart. There's no one who has gone through the upbringing that you've had, positive or negative. It has shaped who you are, and there's not a single person on earth who will walk and do the exact same things the exact same way that you will. And so does it make any sense to live someone else's life? It is actually illogical. And this applies to every stage in life. It's not just the young. It's easy to see when young, there's this idea of thinking about what do I want to be? What do I want to do? Do I listen and do I act like those that are around me? We are influenced by those around us. Can't help that. But it's like, what do I choose? Do I live the life of a parent that I see next to me? Or like them? Or do I live the way that God has created me? As we get into retirement, do I look and go, okay, I'm gonna make up for all the things I want to do, and I'm going to do what everyone else is doing? Or is there a level of purpose that might be there somewhere? Jesus actually hits on this. Maybe in a strange place. Look in John chapter 21. John's fourth gospel, if you're not familiar with it. Don't fret, fourth gospel in the New Testament. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. We're going to find ourselves in chapter 21. So the scene for this is Peter has failed. He's like, man, I will not fail. He was passionate when he told Jesus this, but then he failed. And as Jesus told him, he said, you're going to fail 3 times. And what we have is in the scene is Jesus has actually pulled Peter aside and he has restored him 3 times to address the failure that he had earlier. And he says this to him after this discussion. He says in verse 18, I tell you the truth, when you were young, you were able to do as you liked. You dressed yourself, went wherever you wanted to go. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands and others will dress you and take you where you don't want to go. Jesus said this to let him know by what kind of death he would glorify God. Then Jesus told him, follow me. Peter turned around and saw behind them the disciple Jesus loved, the one who had leaned over during the supper and asked Jesus, Lord, who will betray you? Peter asked Jesus, what about him, Lord? And then Jesus replied, and we have this written in red. It's Jesus' words, but there was a tone that we don't know, but if I may, just a little bit, I think there was a tone of finality that Jesus was trying to get across to him. Peter had asked, what about him? What about his life? And Jesus leans in and says, if I want him to remain alive until I return, what is that to you? As for you, follow me. Now, we all want to have a life to glorify God, I would assume, in this room. Actually, by design as humanity, we are made in his image. In the end, we are to glorify him. Now, honestly, looking at Peter's way that he was glorifying God, that one is not enticing to me. I don't know who that would be enticing to. By tradition, we know that Peter was crucified in the end and actually crucified upside down as a statement of his unworthiness before God to die as Christ did himself. But we all want to glorify God. Now, that was his end, and Jesus says, don't worry about the end. He looks at Peter and he says, follow me. Following Jesus gets to purpose. Jesus is saying, follow me. Now, who is it that says, follow me? It's a fair question. Psalm 139. If you want to find that, you can turn there. I'll read to you if you. It's no problem. Psalm 139 is right there, kind of in the middle of the Bible. Most of the time, Psalm 139 is talked about and looked at as an understanding for an insight into the creation of life. And it is that. Now, we have, if that's commonly the way that you would hear it, I would ask you to set aside habit and to listen to it creatively with a different ear towards this. The psalmist writes, and he talks about this person who does all of this, God. Listen for the character and what he is like as the psalmist talks about this. Oh Lord, you have examined my heart and you know everything about me. You know when I sit down or stand up. You know my thoughts even when I am far away. You see me when I travel and when I rest at home. You know everything I do. You know what I'm going to say even before I say it, Lord. You go before me and follow me. You place your hand of blessing on my head. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too great for me to understand. The psalmist is talking here. He says that the way that God does this, as we talk about this, we use words like omnipresent or omniscient, omnipotent. We can talk about some of like what it is, these characterizations of why God is able to do this, but in the end we say basically it's because he's God. And it just blows his mind. He's not, now if you hear this and think, oh, God sounds like a bean counter. He's not. Hold off on that and listen to some of the other things that the psalmist says. I can never escape from your spirit. I can never get away from your presence. If I go up to heaven, you're there. If I go down to the grave, you're there. If I ride the wings of the morning, but dwell by the farthest oceans, even there your hand will guide me. Your strength will support me. This is why he knows. I could ask the darkness to hide me and the light around me to become night, but even in darkness, I cannot hide from you. To you, the night shines as bright as day. Darkness and light, they're the same to you. You made all the delicate inner parts of my body and knit me together in my mother's womb. Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. Your workmanship, that word, workmanship, think of like an artist who is finally crafting something out of both art and skill and determination that sees beauty and reveals that. That is the type of word that we're talking about here. He says, your workmanship is marvelous. How well I know it. You watched me as I was being formed in utter seclusion, as I was woven together in the dark of the womb. You saw me before I was born. Every day of my life recorded in your book, every moment laid out before a single day had passed. How precious are your thoughts about me, O God, or how precious are your thoughts to me, O God. Either way, they cannot be numbered. I can't even count them. They outnumber the grains of sand. And when I wake up, you are still with me. Now, why does the psalmist say that thing? See, when we go to sleep, our conscious self turns off. We're not thinking. We are thinking, but not consciously. We have some dreams, some of them weird. It's a question for God later. It's like, what in the world? There's an activity, but it's different. And he's saying that when I wake up and when I gather myself and I become conscious and aware of you again, you've already been there. There's not a moment, actually, if a moment it can exist for God who is outside of time, not a moment passes when God is not occupied with thinking about us. This is the one that says, follow me. Doesn't it make sense to know the one who knows us so well? Doesn't it make sense that he is the one who can give purpose to our uniqueness, to the uniqueness of who you are? Now, I don't mean like uniqueness like, oh, everyone's a snowflake. Not like that. I mean, that has been used in a way, it's been kind of lost. That has a deep, deep rootedness as to what uniqueness really is. And maybe you struggle with that. Maybe there's some things, as we talk about this and talk about knowing this God who knows us so well, you feel like, no, I don't know how to know him like that. The things I know of myself, you have a mental way of thinking that rumination, despite having talked about it, still sits there. Maybe there's some things that have come into your life that as you look at going, man, I want to know God, but there's just things that block and that they shape, they cast shadow over how to know him. I would throw out to you to watch for regeneration. Regeneration is specifically designed for that. It is a discipleship. Hear that, please. It is about growing in Christ, but looking at and the starting point of a place of where we struggle. If it is a struggle to see myself as something marvelous and a workmanship, it is a great opportunity to pull this in and to walk slowly through this and to learn how God truly sees us and to feel that we're able, maybe to get out of our own way, to step up closer to him. We'll be offering that later. You'll see something for it in June, opportunity to sign up for that. So how is it that we pull out this uniqueness with which we've been created? And the world would offer this. Pursue passion. Heard it? If you've heard any graduation speech, you've probably heard it. Maybe you've even said it. Quit it. We should quit pursuing passion. We should pursue purpose. Passions are fine. They really are. To have them is not a bad thing. Passions they can add an energy and a spice to life, to be sure, but they do not make a good compass. Pursuing passion does not necessarily mean that we will land on purpose. If we're aiming at passion, you're going to hit the wrong thing. It depends on where you aim. So a couple years ago when we moved back from Arizona, come back into Oklahoma, one of the things I wanted to do was I wanted to get back into hunting. I used to hunt when I was younger. I used to be a crack shot. Thank you very much. That is a perishable skill. Not quite the crack shot I used to be. And so one of the things I wanted to do was to go dove hunting. Now, me and another guy, there was a couple guys have gone here with, we went dove hunting. It was, I think it was the last day of the season. It was stupid cold. I think we were literally, there were maybe 2 other guys in northern Nebraska that were hunting that day. Otherwise, everyone else was smarter than us and stayed in. It was so cold. The wind was blowing so hard. Now, here's the deal. As I've been looking at this and did some study on dove hunting as I was reading through things, understand this. The dove hunting is one of the more expensive game bird hunts. Here's why. You get a piece of meat about like this, and what it takes to pull one of these down, on average, 5 to 6 shots. 5 to 6 tries before you pull down a piece of meat that's like this. I can tell you that the 5 to 6 shots is pretty accurate average for the guys I was with, not me per se. That's not true. On this day when we went out, the wind was blowing so hard, and these suckers, they fly fast anyways. They're a very fast bird, and they're like magicians. They're acrobats in the air. Their aerodynamics, what they can do, the way they zig, drop, move, just almost like they would turn on a dime and turn on. It's like watching Tom Cruise in a jet. It's just insane what they'll do. It is easy to miss, but the key is, and everyone who's ever hunted knows this one: if you aim at the bird as you're going across, you're going to miss. What do you have to do? You have to aim at nothing. You have to lead it. You have to aim at out here in the air, and as it comes by, that's when you'll hit it. It's the same way. Our aim has to be elsewhere other than passion. You are meant to pursue purpose, not passion. And the Gospel of Mark zeroes in on this. And if you caught that, zeroes in, aiming, yeah, that was a dad joke. Mark chapter 3. This will be the last place that we jump. If you want to turn there, Mark chapter 3, second gospel in the New Testament. Mark chapter 3, starting in verse 13. It says this: Now Jesus went up on a mountainside and called to him those he wanted, and they came to him. And he appointed 12 that they might be with him, and that he might send them out to preach and to have authority to drive out demons. Now notice that. Jesus called the 12 that they might be with him. We are doers. We don't want to sit, we want to do. This goes against our natural inclinations as Americans, Midwestern work ethic, everything like that, to simply be before doing. But Jesus makes very clear that we do out of our being. And the way that Mark puts this, we would be overlooking something if we ignored the fact of what he listed first. He says he called these 12, his disciples then and his disciples today, in order that they might be with him. These guys were going to nail purpose, because he was going to send them out to preach and cast out demons. They were going to nail purpose. But do not miss what Christ put first and what is primary in his thinking, as he says, in order that he called them in order that they may be with him, to know him. Now, there's something that goes on here that's called, it's a bit of like a Markan sandwich. Markan meaning like it's of Mark. Sandwich, how many about it just lose because we're approaching lunch? Anyone? So don't hear that sandwich, but it kind of works. There's a Markan sandwich, and the Markan sandwich, it's a ploy that Mark uses as he shares the gospel. And to drive home a point, you have a main point which is in the middle. And we have this here is the teaching of Christ, or this teaching about Christ and when he called them in order to be with him. And then you have two other pieces that are on the outside. And what they do, though, is they're either events or stories that are meant to highlight and point back to and emphasize that which is in the middle, the meat of it. And one of the commentators that I was reading, he said this, that the disciples, the 12, were about to learn the difference between hanging around with Jesus and knowing him. And this is brought out even just by the way that Mark wrote. The first is the crowds. That's the first piece on the outside. You have the crowds in the verses ahead in 7 through 12. These are crowds that they gathered in massive numbers. And if you think about what these crowds saw miracles. Some of these in the crowd may have actually had miracles done in their life. They ate food that showed up absolutely miraculously. They have heard him teach and heard him teach with authority. They have been amazed. They have been caught up in this. They are passionate about him. That is why they continue to gather. They're living life with the other ones right there. But what we know is it was not enough. They did not heed the same opportunity that his disciples did to come and truly know him, to be with him. We know in John chapter 6 that so many just bailed and left. Their passion died out, the teaching got to be difficult, and they left. And they chose not to simply be with him. Those who stayed said pretty much that very thing. Where else can we go? They chose to be with Jesus. So you have the crowd on one side. On the other side, you have family. Now, if anyone had opportunity to be with Jesus and should know him, you would think it would be his family. Grew up in the same house, worked in the same shop, watched each other grow, all these things, ate together, had meals together, knew one another, supposedly. But look what it says in verse 21. When his family heard what was happening, they tried to take him away, saying he is out of his mind. Safe to say, they did not know him. There is a vast difference between being around him, seeing him, hearing from him, and truly knowing him, to be with him. Now, this being with him is something that is developed. It is through time. But there's something that is unique about it, about this being with him through prayer and study and time here with others. But there's something about a posture, there's some type of response the disciples were invited into both then and now that is different than simply being around, hanging around, even seeing amazing things. There is something about knowing him. And when we know him and we aim at being with him, that puts a lead out on us. That as we follow him, as we know him, we will hit purpose. If we aim at passion, that is not a guarantee that you will hit purpose. As a matter of fact, those who would start and talk about passion, most of them who have had success have converted and understood that they had to develop purpose. And here's a question for you. The God who's done all these things, who put us together, who has created and sustains all these things, if we were to simply pursue him, which feels awkward, it is something that is developed, and he leads us towards purpose, can the God who has done all these things, can he not give us passion for what it is that we're doing? I would urge us, don't live someone else's life. Quit doing that. And it's like, okay, well, how do I do that? Well, don't pursue passion. Quit doing that. Pursue purpose. As we finish this up, I say this. It comes from aiming at being with him. If you find yourself today and you're sitting there and saying, I don't know him at all, please I welcome you to come talk with me after service. Actually, any one of our staff members would love to talk to you about that. If you want to know of like going, okay, there's this difference of simply being around and knowing about, hanging out with, and truly knowing him. How do I get there? How do I take steps in that one? Please talk with me afterwards. Let us find and help you in that. It is a learned thing, and we learn together. You can talk with Doyle about that. You can talk with some others. It is our desire to see us grow in knowing, truly knowing him, so that we don't live anyone else's life, but live the life that he has set out for us by following him and knowing him this well. It makes a difference. Let's pray. Jesus, I am grateful that you give us the opportunity, invite us, just like you invited the disciples then, you invite us now to know you. And there's a mystery to some of that, Jesus. There are some of the things that we can do that we should be able to know you can sometimes and feel like I don't. And that's part of that process. I pray that any of us, as we seek to know you, that you would have mercy and that you would complete that which is still mysterious to us, you are faithful to actually do. As we respond to you, to be with you, as we respond to that, thank you that you respond in kind and will make yourself known. In Jesus' name.